Chapter 13 Many Mad Moments. By 2012, Dehradun, Guntur, Ahmedabad, and Mysore had signed on to become mad cities. 2012 23 cities, 2000 plus volunteers. The rapid growth in numbers within 6 years obviously meant that MAD was adding value to the many lives that had volunteered to become a part of the MAD journey. The narratives are numerous and diverse. Obviously, MAD means different things to different people, but two constant themes that run through all the MAD narratives are the yearning to belong and to make an impact. And that is the irresistible lure of MAD. Within the MAD circle, everyone drags deep of the idea that we can change the world and therefore we must. MAD has a belief system that is positive and empowering, and therefore not one that is universally understood or shared. This insane optimism is the dividing line between the organization and a world that is more or less wedded to the idea of futility. Those of us who share this belief system are baited by the overwhelming need for a world where we fit in with effortless ease, and MAD provides us with that space. Many of us need MAD so intensely that if MAD had not existed, we would have probably had to invent it or something MAD-like. For a while after its inception, when it could not afford an office, Make a Difference operated without an office. It existed not as a physical space or a concrete structure, but as an idea that rallied the believers. A disparate bunch of people who had no other commonality. Later, MAD did manage to carve out a more concrete existence for itself. But the warp and weft of the organization remained unchanged. MAD continued to be a tribe of incongruous people held together by a common cause. The geek, the nerd, the dropout, the student, the professional, the entrepreneur, the parent. The MAD mark flexed and stretched to make space for anyone who wanted in. And those who came in flexed and stretched to make their own space within MAD. The greatest of MAD moments have come about through unlikely partnerships that are struck in the midst of this swirling milling. There is a method to the madness, and it works well for MAD. 2012 was just about jam-packed with those moments. It was a year of highs, lasting impressions, and abiding memories. Some MAD volunteers from 2012 remember it as the year of phenomenal Mahindra Spark, the rice campaign. Some remember it as the year that Jobish went to USA. For many national team members, it was the year of the new MAD mission statement and the Act 2. For MAD, Chennai, It was the year that Matt It was the year that Matt Boomy terminated its partnership. For Junior, it was the year he joined Matt as a full-time employee and organized the first LXD conference. Worky remembers the year mainly for FORM, Friends of Matt, formation, while Jitin's memories are focused on the new Matt startups, iHub and Dream Tea. For me, it was the year that Sneha Children's Home grappled with problems that arose from the construction next door. Act 2012 Awesome Circle Time. 2012 began on a high note with the launch of Samarth Agarwal's brainchild Act 2 2012. This was to become MAD National Team's biennial pilgrimage to all its centers, an attempt to maintain and strengthen relationships within the organization. As a MAD volunteer, Samath had the occasional experience of feeling a disconnect with the national team. Since communication between the national team and the volunteers was usually filtered through intermediaries, there was plenty of room for miscommunication and missed communication. Now, as MAD COO and as a part of the national team, Act Tour was his attempt to shrink the distance between the Bangalore-based national team and the MAD centers spread across the length and breadth of the country. The national team would travel through every one of its cities and make the effort to connect to the volunteers, understand their problems and aspirations, apprise them of the MAD values, inspire the volunteers to step up and take on greater responsibilities within MAD, and retrieve any data that had been lost in translation. On the MAD Facebook sites appeared a teaser trailer which promised 19 cities, 55 days, one idea to kick some MAD ass. Set to quirky visuals and edgy musics, the tour was labeled a reality check by top dogs on what works and what does not. Typical MAD stuff, serious agenda with unorthodox frills. Almost 2 months later, the Act Tour wound up in Delhi, Samath's hometown, having achieved most of what they had set out to do. There was plenty of communication, even if some of it was heated and loud. The Kochi stopped being a case in point. In discussion with the national team, the city volunteers realized that there had been a proposal to close down one of the city centers due to volunteer shortage. Although nothing had come of it, we were miffed at being bypassed in the decision-making process. As volunteers, we were one of the primary stakeholders in the MAD Center, and finding that there had been conversations over our heads was very upsetting for most of us. But differences had been acknowledged. Conversations had started. So, the two definitely managed to build some bridges, although the process was not always pleasant. The national team was especially successful in enthusing the volunteers to take on leadership roles. The following year, a large number of recruits for the national team were volunteers who were galvanized by the Act 2. But just like communication, this too was a two-way process. The national team, in turn, was inspired by the strong culture of selflessness displayed by the MAD volunteers. They were struck by the innovation and energy at MAD centers and the average volunteer's commitment to the cause, which went much beyond the job description and the call of duty. They returned with renewed faith in the idea of youth as the agent of change. Act 2012 reinforced the MAD belief that if given an opportunity, young people had the potential and the willingness to make the turnaround that India so desperately needs. They could complete the task of reclaiming the lives of the 20 million children across the country who are deprived of a safe, familiar shelter. MAD for Impact. Mahindra Spark the Rise Award. For an Indian cricket enthusiast, the 1983 World Cup win in the moment. For Beatles fans, it is the shooting of John Lennon. For a MAD volunteer, it was the Spark the Rise campaign in the summer of 2012 that was the ultimate high. Not the close finish, not the runner-up tag, not even the award. It was the campaign itself. A mention of the campaign and all MAD volunteers who were involved in that campaign react the same way. They get the look on their faces. Their eyes glaze over slightly as the brain goes into rewind mode, and then the smile as the retreat into the past is complete. Mahindra Spark the Rise Award is remembered within MAD for the spectacular campaign run by Junior. Weaving together thousands of volunteers across the country by the strands of a common cause and motivating them to work towards the goal with a bloody-minded relentlessness. One of his pet theories of those days was this: to reach a goal, the two most important things are a passion for the cause and a team that works in sync for the cause. It was a hypothesis that he put to test during the campaign for Mahindra Spark the Rise Award. Support, encouragement, and inspiration pondered out of his keyboard to channelize the energy of the entire organization and to keep every volunteer across the country focused on the singular dream of winning the award. Words have rarely been used to such effect. The award was based on voting through SMS, and MAD volunteers scrambled around to get the numbers. After exhausting family and friends, it was the turn of the long-lost relatives and uncertain acquaintances. With even that source drying up rapidly, it fell to complete strangers to make a difference past the winning post. And that's when being young and resilient came in real handy. Across every city, there were mad volunteers prowling public spaces, asking strangers for SMS votes. They haunted parks and roads and gyms in the wee hours of the morning, the malls and colleges in the day, and train stations after nightfall. The campaign got a shot in the arm with an ingenious piece of technology introduced by Mad CTO Binny. It was an app that could be downloaded onto the mobile phone, and it tracked the progress of the Mad campaign on a vote by vote basis. It was now possible to see the immediate effect of the inputs, and thereafter there was no stopping the volunteers. The pitch of the campaign simply rose higher and higher until the end was sounded, and even after the culmination of the event, the tremendous passion unleashed by the campaign cemented the ties that knit together the volunteers. Junior was on target with his theory that passion and teamwork were the critical elements for success. The unlikely duo of the wordsmith and the techie had catalyzed one of the greatest highs in Mad's history. The campaign threw up so many positives that eventually the result ceased to matter, especially in the long run. One of the volunteers, who was in the thick of things, does not even remember that Mad did not win the campaign. She is slightly surprised at that because she only remembers feeling like a winner. We did ourselves proud by the way we ran the campaign. We stayed true to Mad values, put cause above all else, and took ownership of the campaign, right down to the individual volunteer level. It gave us a sense of what we could achieve as a team. Nothing is impossible. The sky is the limit. Every single cliche rang true in those days. Mad meetings. April 2012 was also the month for the first Mad Leadership Conference. Ever since the first Mad National Conference, all Mad conferences had an operational function to prepare the cities for implementation of Mad programs by giving them the requisite skills and training, and to get feedback from the cities about on-ground happenings. But with continued growth came increased complexity, wherein individual cities and sometimes individual senders were continually faced with unique challenges that required unique solutions. In the given scenario, relying on standard procedures was becoming increasingly unviable. At this juncture, Akshay stepped in with the answer: investing in people instead of processes. So, instead of investing in processes that provided the solution, Matt decided to focus on leaders who would design those solutions. The fundamental structure of MAD conference was changed, and it was redesigned as an L into D, Leadership into Design program. The L into D program was based on Stanford's design thinking principle. This is an approach to learning that focuses on developing creative conference, which inculcates creative problem solving and leadership skills in participants. The MAD conference no longer served an operational function. It was now a program delivered through the timeline of 1 year to develop competent leadership within individual MAD cities and MAD centers. By strengthening leadership on the ground, MAD was attempting to generate leaders who were able to solve problems, motivate the volunteers, and serve the community. Investing in people would allow MAD to resolve challenges quickly and effortlessly wherever, whenever they arose. In 2012, over 250 MAD volunteers started their journey with the L into D program. Junior had been associated with MAD for a long time, but the success of the MAD Leadership Conference, following closely on the heels of Spark, the Rise campaign, made him a rock star at MAD. Junior was a part of every single conference conducted by MAD till he left the organization in 2014. He played a key role in structuring and setting up the L into D conferences. Twice a year, young leaders from across the country were invited to leadership circles to participate in a unique learning process. As part of MAD's youth development program, L into D, these conferences set up an entrepreneurial space for the volunteers and facilitated dialogue within the organization. They also provided a chance for these young leaders to have a say and participate in MAD's growth, vision, and future plans. MAD's leadership circles were intensively 3 or 4 day affairs where fellows were put through path-making workshops, do-it-yourself sessions, and intense debates, all with the view to improving the functioning of MAD chapters across India. The success of LC 1.0 conference was followed by the continued use of L into D program for LC 2.0 in 2013. Leadership training had become the order of the day at MAD. FOM and Dream Team. Even when the years saw Bhumi and Make a Difference go their separate ways in Chennai, groundwork was being laid for fresh ties between MAD and the community at large. The first half of the year saw the inception of FORM and Dream Tea project. There were commonalities between the two new projects. They were an effort by MAD to improve its reach within the community. They were a part of the fundraising efforts by MAD. They were reasonably successful in achieving their objectives. Both were shut down 2 years later because they did not fit into the larger scheme of things at MAD. Dream Tea. In September, MAD launched its own t-shirt brand called Dream Tea. The idea being that with every t-shirt sold, MAD would be able to educate one child at one of our centers. Another rationale behind the project was to rope in more people with a varied range of skills into the organization. During MAD recruitments, a large number of enthusiastic applicants were often turned away because they did not have the requisite classroom skills. At one of the recruitments, an applicant who was rejected as a teacher volunteer made an eloquent plea to us. "Don't you have anything to do for the non-teachers? Can't you take me on as a driver volunteer? I am an awesome driver. I could drive everyone everywhere." It felt lousy to put the lid on such youthful zeal, but there really was little opportunity at MAD for any volunteer who couldn't teach. Dream Tea was slated to be one of the projects which would make use of volunteers like this. Those who couldn't teach but could do other stuff like drive. It would also enable MAD to derive greater financial support from the local youngsters rather than just from the corporate lobby or the rich. Selling, buying and wearing MAD t-shirts would create a greater connect between MAD and local youth, even those who were not MAD volunteers. The idea took hold and Dream Teas began to appear for sale at almost all big college fairs in the country and were sold by thousands. But despite the immediate success of the project, 2 years later, the Dream Tea project was temporarily shut down. The cost of merchandising was too high and MAD did not have the financial clout to handle the large amount of funds required to generate stocks. MAD is not a cash-rich NGO. Some days, MAD has not more than a few thousand rupees in the bank. Our financial model is not viable to carry on with the Dream Tea project. We may be in a position to revive it another day when we have figured out the finances. It was a success after all, but as of today, MAD cannot afford the Dream Tea project. A MAD finance fellow gives his assessment of the situation. Form. was launched as the fundraising wing of MAD. Known as FORM, it was created to take charge of corporate relations and do fundraiser events in support of MAD projects. So effectively, MAD had branched out into two distinct functional entities. MFC, MAD for Children, which was responsible for implementing MAD projects and FORM. Fundraising was a time-gobbling monster at MAD, often diverting the volunteers from their primary duties. Most volunteers begrudge the time given for fundraising and in their darkest moments label the duty corporate horrid. The theory behind FORM was that with a separate section taking up the responsibility of gathering funds for MAD activities, it would ease the burden of other volunteers, leaving them entirely free to focus on the task at hand. This was also another attempt to draw in more members of the community into MAD. People whose skills did not lie in teaching or interacting with kids, but nevertheless wanted to contribute their time to the cause. They could participate in MAD cause for children by ensuring financial support for the various MAD projects. From its very inception, FORM had faced dissent within MAD. Some members of the national team were ideologically uncomfortable with the idea of setting up an organization whose raison d'etre was generating money. This unease had surfaced during documentation of MAD values with the explicit statement that in MAD, no program will be created just for the sake of raising funds. Money is just an input of the program, not an end in itself. 2 years into the operation, this divide had grown too wide to bridge. On one side were MAD members who believed that MAD as a whole carried the responsibility of sensitizing the community to their cause. That every social interaction of MAD had to be laced with the objective of carrying the MAD idea forward. They felt that the very existence of FORM was a variance with this ideology. Their assessment was that FORM was increasingly being driven by numbers, and in their race to reach targets, they were losing sight of MAD's primary objective and distancing themselves from other volunteers, other MAD projects, and even children served by MAD. The question then was whether this schizophrenic continuance was possible, with one arm of MAD focused on and driven by money, and the other committed solely to the idea of social change. On the other side of the divide were MAD members who believed that the entire argument of FORM versus rest of MAD was an ideologically confused argument. Their argument was every institution is glued together by an identity. It could be an ideological identity, often culture-based, that keeps countries united, or a functional identity like that of an army which has a specific duty to perform. Make a Difference has a strong mad culture, for want of a better word. This ideological identity makes for a real sense of community within the organization and is a great unifier. But for better outcomes, a functional identity is far more efficient. A functional identity spells out the objective, making it that much easier to get there. They felt that despite having its own logo, different from MAD logo, and its own president at the city level, and its own team, FORM was not a separate entity from MAD. That FORM had a sharp functional focus that made for greater impact on ground and better impact. But this did not detract from the fact that it was still grounded in MAD ideology and existed within the MAD fold. This line of thought prioritized outcome overall else and envisioned Make a Difference as an umbrella organization running different volunteer networks. Each volunteer network defined sharply by its individual functional identity. The teaching network, the fundraising network, and the technical network. Both decision making and implementation would thus be streamlined, giving Make a Difference far greater organizational efficiency. There was an equal and opposite counterpoint to this argument within MAD, one which focused on collaborative spirit to make real impact on the ground, which believed that an organization has to pull together to get there, and competitive spirit results in too much energy getting dissipated by the way of friction. A national team member who was never comfortable with the idea of FORM says, FORM did have a strong functional identity. In 2 years of existence, it almost became a brand of its own. The FORM volunteers really warmed up to this separate branding. What had started off as friendly rips and jest between FORM volunteers and the MFC volunteers got completely out of hand. The camaraderie was getting crushed by a very real rivalry that was springing up between the two. Can an organization survive two different peoples with two different objectives? Does the larger picture remain a common meeting ground? Can they continue to pull in the same direction, maybe even more efficiently? No, say those who wanted to vote FORM out of existence. The writing was already on the wall. FORM volunteers were so detached from the MFC projects that they no longer wanted to attend project implementation meetings of MFC. Farm volunteers were already drifting away from the other volunteers. They were becoming strangers in the mad crowd. It was us and them. Yes, say those who wanted Farm to stay. Farm was simply rooting for efficiency by wanting to focus on its own turf. Farm performance was efficient and the outcome was good. The spotlight on the ideological divide was unwarranted and the differences between the volunteers were overplayed. At the end of the day, the job must be done in the best possible way and Farm was a step in the right direction. The former argument finally held sway and Farm became one of the 4 supporting teams for MAT's projects alongside HR, PR and finance. The fundraising team no longer had its own logo and its positioning within the organizational structure was maneuvered to allow for greater interaction with the other teams in MAT. Make a Difference as an organization had chosen ideological identity over the functional identity. Many of the volunteers who worked with Farm now work with the fundraising vertical and continue to perform the task they previously did. The difference is that now they are a part of one big MAT family. This has been the underlying message in all communities to the MAT volunteers in the year 2014 to 2015. No more MFC. MAT for children, the teaching volunteers, and Farm, the fundraising volunteers, just one big MAT family. With that chapter of MAT having closed, it is difficult to say how it would have played out in the long run and whether Farm had a good thing going. But I think I can make a fair guess about what tilted the scales against it. 8 years after inception, Make a Difference continues to be a highly idealistic organization at its core. Despite the rapid growth in size and numbers, it has managed to hang on to its culture connect. A concrete, documented standard of beliefs and behavior that insiders call MAT values. By displaying separateness in attitude and function, Farm probably breached the spirit of MAT values, which places great emphasis on MAT unity and on money as a means, not the end. Thereafter, Farm probably had little chance of survival in the original avatar. As of now, the organization is betting on ideological identity as the glue to hold MAD together as one big family. Formed just like the dream team, turned out to be a great idea that just did not fit into the MAD scheme of things. This aspect of MAD history does illustrate the difficulty that organizations often face in building a consensus without breaching the solidarity of the organization. This task is further complicated in an overwhelmingly young organization inundated with impassioned ideas and rousing opinions. To harness these passions effectively without rupturing, the organization is a fine balancing act that would require formidable interpersonal skills from the national team and steadfast reality to the cause from the volunteers. But it is a culture that will have to be developed within MAD, since it is critical to the effective functioning of the organization. As for differences that have to be resolved on a personal level, everyone has a different route to conflict resolution. But again, as long as the personal does not overshadow the cause, a middle ground is always possible. Junior tells me his way. Jidin and I hold very strong opinions, and we often had irrevocable differences on issues. Sometimes these differences hampered our operations, and that was the last thing Jidin and I wanted. So we hit upon a ground rule. The ship has left the building. Basically, we set a deadline for reconciling our differences. By that time, we had to have a consensus which we were both supposed to accept wholeheartedly. No foot dragging or backtracking thereafter. And if one of us ever brought it up again or said, "I told you so," then the rejoinder would be, "Bro, the ship has left the building." Man has a job to do. If the job has to get done, it is important to stop jawing and knuckle down to it. Of course, if you are consistently being overridden, it means that you are not ideologically suited to being in man and should probably move on. The jobbish factor. In 2012, Jobbish Matthew was In 2012, Jobbish Matthew came into the spotlight as the first MAD student to clear the exam for a US scholarship. Everyone at MAD felt a great deal of paternal pride in Jobbish and his achievements. But his story had more than one interesting facet to it. Jobbish was a part of Jitin's first venture at YMCA. He was the keeper of the Royal Library. As the most responsible boy in YMCA, he was handpicked to take charge of the books in the library. 6 years later, his success in the scholarship exam served as an inspiration to many of the MAT volunteers and MAT students at government homes. There was much cheering at MAT when he left to attend a US college, and even louder cheering when he returned and joined MAT as a volunteer. As fascinating as all this is, to me the most interesting bit is his fanatical pursuit of academics. Education is the most important ingredient for success. I want to continue to study all my life, he told me. I was suitably impressed, but my jaw really dropped when he told me that he had never failed in any exam in his life. Without individual supervision and personal guidance, most of the children at the MAT centers lack motivation to study, and academic failures are a common feature in their lives. Even the really bright ones flunk occasionally due to emotional turbulence. It is all par on course. But Jobish, in turns out, was in the YMCA sheltered home purely because of economic compulsions. His parents could not finance the latter part of his schooling, and so he was sent to YMCA with explicit instructions to avail of the opportunity for higher education. Even while he was in YMCA, his parents hovered around constantly. They attended every parent-teacher meeting and were present to check on his marks for every test, every assessment, and every exam. His father, who could not continue his education after grade 9, was adamant that both his children study extensively. After his return, Jobish has gone back to the US for further studies, while his sister is completing her master's degree from Kerala. Jobish is different in that he did not experience the full impact of an institutionalized childhood. His family was constantly at his elbow, even though he lived away from home for a couple of years. His stint at YMCA was almost like a hostel experience. There was always a home to go back to, and the familial safety net was intact. The fact that he has a highly functional family is evident in his emotional balance, social competence, and unflagging enthusiasm to press on with his life. Although Make a Difference volunteers take a great deal pride in the way this panned out. In reality, Matt can take only partial credit for the turnaround in his life, since he had so much going for him anyway. It was just a quirk of fate that Jobish and Matt came together at the critical juncture for a win-win outcome. Jobish got a year at a US college, and Matt got the taste of sweet success from a low-hanging fruit. But considering how hard the Matt volunteers work, they are certainly entitled to a few easy successes. After Jobish, Three more students from math centers were Three more students from math centers went to the US for higher studies. Every one of these achievements was a source of great joy for math volunteers. But none of these could measure up to the adrenaline rush provided by Joby's success. As the first among equals, Joby's cheerful Facebook updates and photos of life on college campus are a constant reminder of the possibility of a happy ending for each life touched by Make a Difference. The Ashwin Factor. In 2012, my older son Ashwin was formally inducted into MAT. As a teacher volunteer at Sneha Children's Home, he ended up teaching many of his former playmates, including Senthil. Senthil sent me an email telling me how delighted he was to have Ashwin as his teacher. Ashwin, in turn, was delighted to be teaching the reformed Senthil. He had vivid memories of the havoc wrought by Senthil during my first year at Sneha Children's Home. IHUB. Being a youth organization also meant that the place was bubbling over with ideas. New ideas, old ideas, fresh ideas, rehashed ideas, reworked ideas, recycled ideas, outstanding ideas, outrageous ideas, out of the box ideas, every kind of idea and then some. To avoid being buried under the avalanche, Matt came up with the best idea of all, IHUB. IHUB was created as a platform to channelize all the ideas bouncing around in MAT. It was a call to the MAT volunteers to take ownership of MAT and to change the organization for the better. All over the country, MAT volunteers were creating innovative solutions for the challenges they faced on a day-to-day basis. IHUB was an opportunity to test these ideas across the country at every MAT center. IHUB was the MAT platform to nurture new project ideas, providing logistical support at all stages: research, testing, pilot, till the final rollout and implementation of the project nationwide. MAT's innovation process, IHUB, celebrated the first Innovation Month in October 2012, where more than 250 ideas for new projects and process improvements were received. Of these, the selected 53 entrepreneurs were invited to the first ever Innovation Circle in Bangalore, December 2012. While the idea and the curriculum for IHUB was Akshay's, Samath helped contextualize it for MAT, and both of them delivered it together at the conference. Two of the IHUB ideas that had a direct and powerful impact on MAT classes were the Subjects Project and the Propel Project. These projects changed the way that MAT volunteers operated and interacted with their students in children's home in a very fundamental way. The subjects project, requesting the X support project, pushed MAT towards providing greater academic support to the children at MAT centers. Once the project had been rolled out, MAT began providing after-school tutoring in subjects other than English at all MAT centers across the country. This was a radical shift for the organization from a singular focus on English to a more holistic approach towards academics. The entire MAT machinery had to revisit the processes in place thus far. Recruitment, training, syllabus formation, teaching procedures, student assessments, all of these had to be tweaked to absorb this change in MAT classrooms. Having accepted greater academic responsibility at its centers, today this project covers all the MAT centers across the country. MAT also put in place the ACE project to provide additional 2-year tutoring for grade 9 children in order to prepare them for grade 10 board exam. The seeds of this project were sown by a bunch of Kochi volunteers who decided to put in extra hours to coach their grade 10 students for their board exam. This effort was such a smash hit that it was quickly formalized as a program at the children's home. So, in actuality, it was the ACE project which materialized first and paved the way for the Educational Support Project. The Propel project, a brainchild of Vaibhav and Balia, caught onto the idea of mentorship and introduced MAT to the idea of a wingman. It targeted high school students seeking to provide support and guidance that would enable them to stay the course while pursuing their career paths. Today, this project is operational in 16 MAT cities across India and covers close to 300 students. New Mission Statement 2012. MAT's capacity to absorb differences was sorely tested in 2012. After the internal differences overflowed, another schism surfaced within the organization. The new MAT mission statement was the cause of the next big ideological battle within MAT. Was the MAT mission child-centric or youth-centric? And did it really matter? Yes, it mattered a lot. Because it was about much more than just a simple definition. Hanging in balance was the roadmap of MAT future. When MAT had registered itself as an organization on November 1st, 2006, its mission statement was to bridge the inequality in society through education. Implicit in the statement was the fact that MAT would work with children, and by the very fact of being a youth organization, it would obviously work with young people. This duality of purpose comes across again in the documentation of its objectives. to bring together young people who are willing to volunteer their time in empowering underprivileged youth. A forum for young people to come together and share their knowledge and skill with the underprivileged. And so it went. Young people working with children. Both young and children defining the existence of man. But come 2012, MAD now had 23 cities and 2000 plus young volunteers under its purview. It was time to fine-tune its strategies, processes and operations to manage the numbers. A prelude to that was defining its objectives much more carefully this time. When the founders of Make a Difference had registered the mission statement way back in 2006, they had penned it the best they could and moved on to the groundwork. They were greenhorns with little experience in running an organization or working in the social sector. And they certainly knew nothing about the significance of the mission statement or its impact on the organization at all levels. If we had proper guidance, we would have crossed every T and dotted every I while making out our mission statement. We thought of it as a part of the documentation process for registration, not as a cornerstone of all our strategies and a touchstone to evaluate our progress, says Gigi. So, in 2012, when the mission statement was up for amendment, every nuance in the statement was put under the scanner before approval. This time, MAD had to define its objective in sharp detail, and this definition would lay the framework for MAD's future. Make a Difference was poised at the crossroad, and the choice that it made would decide between the two diverse paths that were open to the organization. This debate, which would define Make a Difference as either child-centric or youth-centric, was perhaps the most intense ideological battle ever within MAD, simply because there was so much at stake. It would change the organization at every level and chart the roadmap of Make a Difference for a very long time to come. The youth-centric version of MAD envisioned the organization as one which harnessed the energy and vibrancy of the youth and applied it to various social issues and applied it to various social causes. Make a Difference would mobilize and empower the youth by providing them a platform to operate from and giving them access to MAD expertise in implementation and logistics. There could be multiple causes running under the common MAD umbrella at any given point. In essence, MAD for Children could operate alongside Mad for Animals, or any other program that Make a Difference was willing to take on. Make a Difference would be an incubator for multiple ideas and through exposure of a multitude of causes. It would accelerate the pace of change in the society. But when the new mission statement was finally hammered out, it was clear that MAD had chosen to tread the path of child centricity. The statement reads, to ensure even the most vulnerable children have access to equitable outcome by empowering children and enabling institutions. Make a Difference had thrown its weight behind a singular cause. It would be MAD for children only. It would continue to focus on empowering underprivileged children. The reasoning behind this was that this problem was so huge and so endemic that unless every little scrap of energy was channeled towards its resolution, there was very little chance of real success. Taking on other social causes would end up with MAD dabbling in too many things and never really making an impact on any of them. Once the decision was made, MAD closed ranks and moved on to implementation and groundwork. But the voices for youth centricity still feel that Make a Difference missed a great opportunity to make a very real social change in India. They have this to say. The numbers are telling. 150 million Indians who are 18 to 23 years old, 400 million below the age of 30. Put together these numbers and MAD expertise in mobilizing the youth, and you have the most potent trigger for change in India. Make a Difference could have built capacity to handle multiple causes and used our current expertise in areas of HR, PR and fundraising to greater effect. But there was genuine fear within MAD that this approach would render the organization into a soulless platform, an operation room for people to implement social causes. We would be taking on so many responsibilities, but in a sense, committing to nothing. We would neither have complete control over implementation nor be responsible for success or failure. We would skim the surface, but never take the plunge. Another reason for the child-centric stand was the realization that resolution of the problem required a slew of expertise from across the social spectrum. MAD would have to look beyond the youth tab and partner with organizations or people who were knowledge leaders in the required field. While young people would continue to be the mainstay of MAD volunteer network, the organization would have to increasingly look beyond for answers. As for the feedback coming in from the field, Make a Difference seemed to be making as much impact on the young volunteers as it was making on the children maybe even more. There were many more inspiring stories of mad volunteers, including ex-volunteers, doing awesome work than they were about the children being impacted by mad programs. Interestingly, this piece of data was used by both sides to bolster their argument. It was interpreted as an evidence of youth potential and also as a pointer for sharper child-centric focus in MAD programs. The youth-centric argument was a compelling one, but eventually it could not withstand the weight of MAD history, which began with the aspiration to transform the lives of children at risk. The MAD stories were always more about the children and less about the organization or the volunteers. So, when it came to award, the child-centric approach simply happened to be on the right side of MAD history. A year after the vote, a national team member told me that, to her, the idea of make a difference being anything other than child-centric was scandalous. I couldn't have handled it had the vote gone the other way. That's how high the emotions ran all through the debate. But more importantly, Matt survived and lived another day to fight another battle.